Hello and welcome, friends! I have a fun project that I'm going to be working on today. This is something I do all the time and it's good to know how to do. I'm going to take the side seams in of this vest. Now you're saying, I don't have a vest, but anything without sleeves, I'm going to take in the side seams of this without sleeves. There's a lining, alright? And I'm going to show you how to get this to fit better. But what is happening is when she puts this vest on, it's gappy right here. It fits her in the bust area, but it's gappy right here. So we're going to take this in just a little bit right there to get this gappiness to go away. Okay, so the lady behind the camera asked a very good question. Why not take in this seam? If this is being gappy right here, why not take that seam in right there? And there's a great reason why I don't do that. Let's pretend that I sew this seam up like this, and I take in 1/2 inch. What happens? Now this is not fitting right, and I'm going to have to alter this seam to come down to fit to where that seam was. But you see, it's because it's cut at an angle, it's not going to seam up very well. It's going to have a big stair step thing right there. So when I pinned this on her, I said, well, we could do that. I knew that would be more work. So I pinned this and it accomplished about 80% of what this would have accomplished, and she was happy with that. Altering this seam would actually be better, but it causes more work and it's a little riskier when you're taking in more than just one part of the dress or the garment or whatever. So since this accomplished most of it, what we wanted it to do, we're just going to do this. Okay. If this was a dress, there would probably be 2 layers all the way to the floor that you could open up and get to that seam to undo. This is not a dress. This is a vest. We need to find a way to get to the inside here. And if you look over here, look, there is the back door. Because there has to be a back door in everything. In every vest, there's a back door. I'm going to undo this back door, turn it inside out, then I'm going to get over here to this seam and this seam, undo it, and get ready for the alteration. Before I turn this inside out, I want to measure this because I need to take this pin out. So I'm going to measure, this is 3/4 of an inch at the top, and I don't want to take out anything else. I'm going to come out of that seam as fast as I can because we're just trying to get less armhole. So I'm measuring it, I'm taking the pin out, and now I'm going to turn it inside out. So you have to open your hole up big enough that your hand can fit in. I'm going to grab it. I'm not letting go with my other hand because I don't want to lose that seam. When you start to do stuff inside out, it's kind of like jumping in a swimming pool and not knowing which way is up for a minute. You just don't want to lose where you are. So this is the seam I'm going to be taking out, and it goes this way. So just so that you'll know, I know what seam is the armhole one because it was top stitched. Neither of these are top stitched. These are the side seams right here and here. This has a top stitch. You can see it right there. So I'm going to start by taking out the top stitching, and then I'm going to take out the regular stitching. Okay, we have this taken apart, and like I said, it's hard to tell what you're doing inside out. So I'm going to turn this back right side out so that you can see it, and you can see what I've done, what I've taken apart. When I first started doing this, I would go inside out several times to make sure I was doing it right. So don't beat yourself up for taking it apart too much. Okay, so we've got that taken apart. We are going to sew in the 3/4 inch. Let me see for a minute. So I actually think I made a mistake here. The seam that I'm going to alter, I usually leave intact, and I mistakenly took that out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these seams out right here. And then I'm going to put this seam back in so I can show you how to do it. Now what I'm going to do is I need to take these seams out. These are the ones, this is the one that goes around the armpit. So my lady behind the camera says, how far out are you going to undo that seam? And if I'm doing 3/4 of an inch, I give myself at least an inch out besides the alteration. It's easy to put back in. And in the beginning when I was doing alterations, I'm like, ooh, don't take it out. Leave in as much of the original as possible. And that's fine, but it's easy to put back in. It's maddening to not take out enough. So I've taken out that armhole right here. I'm gonna finish putting this back in. This is the original stitching. This is the original side seam, right? It needs to be in the original spot so I can measure 3/4 of an inch in and not have that seam moving around. So I've got that one back in. I'm going to put this one back in. Now I'm going to get my 6-inch gauge and we're going to mark this alteration in chalk. Alright, so the side seams fit well. I'm just trying to decrease the gap, this armhole gap on this one. So I want to exit as quickly as possible. So I'm going to mark 3/4 of an inch, even though my 3/4 of an inch measure is gone because I've used it so much. But I'm going to mark this in chalk right there. And then I'm going to go out as fast as I can. It's going to take me probably 3 or 4 inches to get out as fast as I can because you don't want it to be wonky. And by that I mean, if I were to sew like a triangle right here, like just like this, then when I turn it inside out, it'll pucker right there. It's got to be a smooth getaway. All right. So I see my chalk mark right there. It's at 3/4 of an inch. Keep losing it because it's so light. Back stitch. And now we're going to get out the smooth getaway. And the closer I get to the original stitching, the farther or the longer I go. Does that make sense? Let me show you. So when I get close to down here, you see I'm getting close to the original stitching down here. You keep going and you keep going and you keep going so that when I turn this inside out, it's going to look like a straight line. But you just don't want to go too quickly out or you'll be able to see it and you'll have to go back in and fix it. So now that I have this done, I'm going to do the same exact thing to the other side. So now here's what we have. I've made the alteration and now we need to put this back together. So the first thing I'm going to do, you have to ask yourself, how confident am I that this doesn't need to be cut, that it's going to be just perfect? I'm going to see if I can leave this without being cut, because it's always good to have a plan B if she doesn't like it. So I'm just going to take these threads out and I'm going to go to the iron and I'm just going to press it flat so that it will look good. And then we're going to see if we can sew this back together without cutting. Okay, I want to iron these side seams that I just fixed. Now linen is a fabric we don't have to use a pressing cloth. But in order to sew this back together, we have to undo the top stitching so that we can expose the original seam line. When I first started doing alterations, I was mad that I had to undo the top stitching, but it's just better. It just makes it look lots better, and it doesn't take that long. There, we have original seam line exposed. Let's seam this up, and you want to make sure it's unfolded on the back and unfolded on the top. And that question that my lady behind the camera asked me, how far out do you go after the alteration? I did go about 2 inches out. All right, I can feel we're not folded underneath. We're gonna start on that original back stitch and then go around the mountain. Make sure they're lined up. And this will not, don't do that. Okay, that's not gonna want to line up. You'll take it out if you do it. It'll hang wonky, which is another good word. I wonder how many made-up words I have. But I think wonky is a real word. I'm not sure. Let me point out how much nicer my thread matches rather than the manufacturing thread. Haha. Sometimes I'm better. For the love of Pete, Mom. This is what we did, and it looks really good. We're gonna get rid of these little pieces of thread right here. And we're not understitching, we're top stitching, which is nice because we can go through all these layers and we don't have to open it up and go through the inside to do the understitching. We're just gonna do top stitching. One thing I like to do is, this is the inside, right? I'm gonna pull the thread. I'm gonna get both threads to this side so that there's no exposed end of the tail of the thread on that side. I know what you're saying. Wow, that's really, really like micromanaging your threads. But I do like to get the threads on the inside so that nobody will see what I've done. Nice. Now I'm gonna go over the top of this in, see, here's the bad part about having thread that matches better. It's gonna change color and some people might notice, but probably nobody will notice. And we want to make sure that we are doing it just perfectly. So it's the original stitching. Here's what I do, is I look to see how much is exposed right there, and that's what I'm watching right there, to keep a tiny little window of exposed seam right there, so that I'm gonna be doing it just like the original as much as possible, except my thread matches better. And why not? Let's pull that thread through so nobody will see. All right, and then I'll clip that, clip the original, unless your scissors are getting dull and then you need to say bad words in your head. All right, but that looks really good. Thank you for watching my video of how to alter the gappiness out of the sleeve opening. We altered the very top of the side seam, and this is a problem that typically happens to women who have bigger chests. It can work with a vest or it can work with a dress. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and keep an eye out. I'm going to do some virtual live sewing lessons soon.